All right, so let's dive into something that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with.
Yeah.
That dreaded 100% disk usage on your virtual machines.
Right.
You know, you've got your shiny new SSD, you think everything's going to be blazing fast,
Yeah.
and then it just grinds to a halt.
Yep.
It's like having a sports car, but with a clogged fuel line, you
Yeah.
know? All that potential, but you're stuck crawling.
Makes sense.
So we're going to unpack this problem today.
Yeah, let's do it.
Using this technical guide, we found all about troubleshooting 100% disk usage.
Cool.
And get this, even with an SSD, you're not immune.
That's right. It's one of those things people think SSD, that's it, I'm done, I'm good to go.
Right.
But there's so many different components that can slow things down.
So then where do we even begin?
What
This
kind?
guide starts with being a detective,
Yeah.
which makes sense, right?
Oh, for sure.
You can't fix what you don't understand.
Absolutely. The first thing you got to do is figure out what's actually going on.
So the first tool then is the resource monitor.
Yeah.
Like peeking under the hood to see, which processes are eating up all that disk.
Exactly.
So it's not enough to just see the number 100%. We need to see who's doing it.
It's like,
Right.
imagine like a busy highway.
Okay.
Resource monitor is going to show you which vehicles are causing all that traffic.
I like that visual.
So, it could be a couple big trucks or it could be a whole bunch of little scooters
Interesting.
all trying to get through at the same time.
So high disk usage by itself isn't enough.
Right.
What else should we be looking at?
Let's definitely take a look at the read and write speeds.
Okay.
Along with that percentage, if you're seeing high usage but the speeds are low, that's a problem.
So that's like having the highway full of cars, but everyone's going like 2 miles an hour.
Exactly. Something's wrong.
Okay, so we've got our detective hat on. We're using resource monitor to peek under the hood.
Right.
Now let's talk about the usual suspects.
Okay.
So this guide dives into a few common culprits for this whole 100% disk usage nightmare.
Yeah. And one category is what I call the silent performance drainers.
Okay.
Things that are running in the background that we kind of forget about.
Like Windows updates.
Oh, yeah. Especially big updates.
Ugh. It always seems to happen at the worst time.
For sure. They can be real resource hogs because they're downloading files and installing things and
Right.
changing settings.
It's like it decides to do it right when I need to meet a deadline.
Exactly. And then you've got your antivirus software, too.
Oh, yeah, the scams?
Yeah, those deep system scans can really slow things down.
Oh, absolutely.
They're important for security,
Yeah.
but they can really hit that disk usage hard.
Yeah. Okay, so updates antivirus. What else?
Another one's indexing.
Indexing.
Yeah, it's a helpful feature on regular computers,
Mm,
because it helps you find things faster.
right.
But in a VM environment, it's often not necessary, and it just adds extra work for the system.
So step one is just being more aware of all this stuff that's running in the background.
Yeah, think about if you need it, maybe schedule it for like off hours.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit
Sure.
from those background processes to the storage interface itself.
Okay.
So a lot of VMs get set up with SATA to start.
Right, which is fine. It works.
Yeah, it's a common interface.
For like a regular hard drive, it's totally normal.
But in the VM world, there's a better option.
There is. It's called VirtIO.
VirtIO.
Yeah, it's like, think of SATA as a regular highway.
Okay.
And VirtIO is like a high-speed express lane
Nice.
built just for virtual environments.
So less overhead, faster communication.
Exactly.
So switching from SATA to VirtIO sounds like a pretty simple way to boost performance.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
This guide even suggests setting up VirtIO with specific drivers for even better results.
Yeah, like using SESI drivers or single drivers with VirtIO can make a big difference,
Huh, interesting.
especially for things that involve lots of small, random disk access.
So we've talked about what's going on inside the VM.
Right.
But what about the connection between the VM and the storage itself? That's where things get interesting with network storage. Like using something like SMB can be convenient because you can access your files over the network, but it adds another potential point of failure
It does.
because now we're relying on bandwidth.
Right.
And if that connection is slow, even the fastest disk in the world won't be able to keep up.
Exactly. It's like trying to stream a 4K movie on dial-up.
Oh, man.
It's not the movie's fault, it's the connection.
So if you're on a slower network connection, like 1 gigabit,
Yeah.
you might run into problems, especially if you have multiple VMs.
Or other things using bandwidth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in those cases, it might be worth moving to local storage.
If you can.
Yeah, or at least tweaking the SMB settings or upgrading the network.
Definitely.
Okay, so we've covered background processes,
Yep.
the importance of VirtIO, and the potential pitfalls of network storage. What other things could be messing with our VM performance?
Well, sometimes the problem isn't the hardware or the network. It's the virtual disk itself.
The virtual disk?
Yeah, how it's configured. You could have all the best ingredients.
Okay.
But if you bake a cake at the wrong temperature, it's not going to turn out right.
So we're talking about things like cache modes.
Exactly.
Okay.
Like using the right back cache mode can make a big difference.
Right, especially with those VirtIO drivers we were just talking about.
Especially with those.
This guide also mentioned something called discard options.
Oh, yeah?
Which sounds like taking out the trash.
That's a great way to think about it.
Keeping things running smoothly.
It helps the VM reclaim those unused blocks, so it keeps things nice and tidy.
Okay, so before we wrap up this first part,
Yeah.
this guide mentions something that I think might surprise some people.
What's that?
Sometimes the answer is to just update stuff.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes that's all it takes.
Really, just updating things.
Yeah, updating the hypervisor,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the software that manages the virtual machines,
Right.
and the guest agent inside the VM.
Yeah.
Those updates often include performance improvements specifically for disk usage.
So it's like giving your VM a tune-up.
Exactly. Make sure everything's running on the latest and greatest software.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot in this first part, but we're just getting started.
We are.
Welcome back to our deep dive into 100% disk usage.
We've uncovered some of the usual suspects.
Yes, and looked at a few solutions.
But there's more.
Okay, so it's like we've beaten the first level of the video game,
Yeah.
and now we're ready for the advanced strategies.
I like that analogy.
So one thing that often gets overlooked
Yeah.
is monitoring network bandwidth.
Especially with network storage.
Right. It's like we've souped up the engine, but we're still driving on a dirt road.
Makes sense. You know,
Right.
the car can only go as fast as the road allows.
Exactly. So we
Yeah.
need to make sure the network isn't holding us back.
Right. There are tools out there to help you monitor that bandwidth usage.
Okay, so if we're seeing high network utilization along with that 100% disk usage,
Yep.
it might be time to think about upgrade.
Potentially, or look for other bottlenecks on the network.
Okay, so sometimes the solution is outside the VM itself.
It can be.
Now, this guide also talks about something that I think is really cool.
Oh, yeah.
Community wisdom.
Absolutely.
When you're dealing with these problems, you're not alone.
Right? There's so many people out there who's been there.
And they've probably already figured out solutions.
Exactly.
It's like having a global tech support team.
At your fingertips.
Right. So check out those online forums and communities.
They're full of great information.
You can find people who've had the same issue, and they've shared their workarounds and solutions.
Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, you might be surprised by what you find.
For sure.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's take a step back.
Okay.
We started by talking about how important it is to diagnose the problem.
Right. Figure out what's actually going on.
It's like going to the doctor.
Yeah.
You know, they need to figure out what's making you sick before they can give you medicine. And once you've found the bottleneck,
Whether it's a background process or a storage issue or the network.
then you can start implementing the solutions.
Right. We've talked about a bunch of different strategies.
Like scheduling tasks for off-peak hours.
And upgrading to those VirtIO drivers.
And keeping an eye on that network bandwidth if you're using network storage.
And don't forget about the power of the community.
Right. Those online forums can be a lifesaver.
Absolutely.
Now, before we sign off, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question.
Okay.
If you could design the perfect virtual machine environment, what would be your top priorities for storage performance?
That's a great question.
Would you go all out for speed, like with NVMe drives?
Or would you prioritize reliability and stability?
Maybe a combination of both?
It really depends on what you're using the VM for.
So think about that perfect VM environment.
And explore those possibilities.
And be sure to share your thoughts with the community.
Your insights could help someone else out there.
All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive.
Time to wrap things up.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have from those pesky background processes to those awesome VirtIO drivers.
Even explored network storage and all those helpful online communities.
So much good stuff.
Now it's time to put it all together and, really give you the confidence to tackle this whole 100% disk usage problem.
Exactly. Arm you with the knowledge you need.
So I feel like we've given everyone a ton of tools.
We have.
But when you're actually faced with that, 100% disk usage, where do you even start?
Well, the first step is always that diagnosis.
Right, like we've been saying.
Figure out what's causing the problem.
It really is like, like a detective solving a mystery.
But for sure.
You got to gather the clues and figure out who did it.
Exactly. Once you've identified that bottleneck, whether it's process or the storage interface or the network,
Right.
Then you can start applying the right solution.
So just to recap, we've talked about things like scheduling tasks.
For those off-peak hours.
Right, so they're not bogging things down when you need them.
And those VirtIO drivers can make a huge difference.
Oh, yeah. A super easy way to boost performance.
And if you're using network storage, keep an eye on that bandwidth.
Right, and maybe think about upgrading.
If you can.
And I can't stress enough how helpful those online communities can be.
Me neither. It's amazing how much knowledge is out there.
You know, someone somewhere has probably had the exact same problem that you're having.
And they've figured out a fix.
Exactly. So don't be afraid to ask for help.
Now, before we go, let's revisit that thought-provoking question.
The perfect VM environment.
Yeah. What would you prioritize for storage performance?
Oh, man, I'm still thinking about that one.
Would you go all out for speed?
Yeah.
NVMe drives all the way?
Or would you focus on reliability, like build a super stable storage array?
It's a tough choice.
You see, there's no one right answer.
And that's what makes it so interesting.
So think about what's important for you.
And your specific needs.
Explore those possibilities.
And see what works best for you.
And you know what? Share your thoughts.
Yeah, tell us what you come up with.
Let's keep this conversation going.
Absolutely.
Well, that's it for our deep dive into 100% disk usage.
Hope you learned something new.
We'll see you next time.